Hello everyone and welcome back to the penultimate episode of Knowing Wheel in 2023, episode 152 of your favourite Formula 1 show. I'm joined by Lurgy183 today. He's not having fun. You might hear in his voice very soon. He's feeling a bit rough. Apparently, Manchester is not the cleanest of cities. How are we doing, my guy?
I'm unable to talk that much today. I feel like I could do a good voice for like a villain in a film right now. I feel okay. That's difficult. I say that. Yeah, I'll be fine. We'll make it through.
We'll make it through, and of course, I'll just have to edit out a lot of Jamie's coughing but before this goes live. But yeah, quickly, obviously, before we dive in properly, just a reminder, this is the second to last ever episode that is going live on the Matt212 YouTube channel. As always, there's a link down in the description below if you want to go keep checking out the podcast when the new episodes will release into the new year. We are now up to 321 subscribers, so we're making good gains towards Jamie183 as well as we head into the depths of the winter break. But Jamie, talking of winter, often, people like to associate the winter with snow. Snow creates ice, so we're back today with another iceberg video, aren't we?
What a link that was. Yes, we are. We're actually getting towards the bottom of it. So
we've only got 2 more of these to go after today, so we're getting into some very interesting stuff now. Obviously, prior to this point, we kind of had bits and pieces that we'd heard of and other bits that we hadn't. But now we really have been learning quite a lot of interesting stuff as we get into today's episode. So where would you like to start, Jamie183?
Well, I actually don't know that many of these, so I'll start with one that I'm very confident on, which is the Massa 2012 grid penalty in the US Grand Prix. So this is like prime title fight. I think it's second last race, isn't it, for the 2012 season? You've got
second
Alonso.
Or third, yeah.
No, it was second last, I think.
Yes.
You had Alonso against Vettel. Alonso is fighting a pretty losing battle because Vettel's won 4 races on the bounce pretty recently before this. And then Abu Dhabi just swung it slightly in Alonso's favour, but he's still a few points behind. Vettel's got it on pole position. Massa qualifies 7th and Alonso qualifies 8th. So that kind of shows you where the pace of the cars are at in 2012. And then it's the first ever race at COTA, actually, isn't it? And hence, as you often see at new tracks or underused tracks, the clean side of the grid, which is the odd numbers, is often a much better place to start than the other side of the grid, the even numbers. So Alonso's qualified on the wrong side of the grid. Massa's qualified ahead of him. So Ferrari, being Ferrari, unneedingly change Massa's gearbox. And it's not even like they didn't even really try and hide it. They were completely like, this is just to get Alonso on the right side of the grid.
But I didn't even think they changed it either, did they? I think they literally just broke the seal on it, which forced a penalty.
Yeah. So it's quite something. But to be fair, it did work because Alonso immediately jumped to about 4th place, didn't he?
I think it did work. Would imply world championship at the end of the year, but
he ended up finishing second that race. A lot of it was down to jumping 3 cars off the line, which he wouldn't have done from P8. So yeah, there you go.
It was probably the last time ever Ferrari did something quite strategic in a Formula 1 Grand Prix.
It was quite clever.
That was 11 years ago.
Yes, potentially. But Massa was a subservient second driver at that point in his Ferrari career. So yeah, threw away a P7 to start P12, and I think he might have got points, but not that many. So, but it doesn't really matter because it was all about the Drivers' Championship at that point.
Yeah, exactly. It was interesting strategy by Ferrari. Probably would have been one of those ones that had any other team done it, there would have been a rule put in place quite soon after to ban it or do something about it. Not that you ever really could. But Ferrari, of course, being Ferrari, got away with that one. And yeah, it did mean obviously the title fight got dragged all the way to the bitter end in Brazil. And obviously then we know about Fernando Alonso looking out into the middle distance, don't we? I'm going to take us over then, Jamie, to probably one of the wilder ones because a lot of these are quite fact-based now, aren't they? But this one absolutely isn't. This is known as the Senna assassination theory. So, of course, we all know, obviously, about Ayrton Senna's unfortunate fatal collision at the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. Obviously, we still don't technically kind of really know what exactly happened.
Well, the missing telemetry, isn't it? So
the missing telemetry, some believe it was tyre pressures that forced the car to bottom out, and that's what obviously span out on him. Others believe, there was, a different type of part failure on the car. We probably never will know, will we? Being completely honest, considering it was almost 30 years ago now.
That is crazy. Wow.
But one of the wilder theories people have come out with is that Senna was shot by a sniper. Obviously, you're going to Imola this year, aren't you, Jamie?
I am. Yes.
I've been to Imola before, luckily for the Grand Prix. I can tell you where people theorised he got shot from is not an easy place to stand because it's covered in trees and it's basically a very, very steep bank down to a very, very big river. So had someone been there with a sniper rifle, would have been quite an uneasy place to stand. And let's not forget how good of a Navy SEAL or something like that would you have had to have been to hit a moving target going 190 miles an hour through Tamburello.
Yeah, while you're off balance up a tree or something, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Why do people think this is a thing?
I guess they just don't want... I think, obviously, the big one is, of course, no one makes a mistake through Tamburello.
No.
And it's... Potentially, of course, Senna was always known for being able to drive a car completely on the limit. How very, very rarely, obviously, did we see him, overdo, snap, oversteer, that kind of thing. I don't really know. I think just people like to run wild with these kind of things. And, from Formula 1 side of things, if a driver had been shot during a Grand Prix, probably wouldn't be a good look on your sports security.
No, maybe not. But I would heavily imply that probably is a myth.
I'm quite confidently going to say on this podcast that did not happen.
Yes.
I think we can put a stamp on bullshit on that one. I think Jamie is probably a fair way of doing things there. Which one would you like to go into next?
I want to do Foo.
That is a very, very cryptic one. That was a funny reminder.
I reckon some people might remember this. It wasn't that long ago. I think it was around 2017-18 time. Definitely Liberty Media had taken over. And you had the Formula 1 app was getting launched or pushed quite a lot. So a lot of people got the app. And then it was around the time of like Lizard Squad, if you remember them, back in the day. Just hacking everything and causing mischief, basically. They managed, I don't know if it's them, but somebody managed to hack into the Formula 1 app. But they hacked with very good intentions because they weren't aiming to, steal data or ruin a career's worth of...
Not that we know of.
Not that we know of, anyway. But what they did do was send a push notification to everyone with the app just saying the word Foo. F-O-O. Which was just... and it's all lowercase as well. I remember that. So it was just bizarre, really. And... yeah, there was another notification shortly after that was like, Formula 1 should probably tighten their security or something along those lines. And Twitter was just in meltdown, I seem to remember. So, yeah, Foo became a little bit a short-lived meme on the internet for like Formula 1, a nickname Formula 1. But yeah, sadly not. We're back to the real thing. No more Foo.
And I mean, if I remember this correctly, it was within weeks of the app being launched, wasn't it?
Yeah, it wasn't long after.
It was kind of like they got the impression that they kind of bought some pretty basic software off some company that meant they could throw this app out in the space of a week, kind of thing. And someone went, well, I've already hacked that software before. I may as well do it again. Have a quick go and have a bit of a laugh with it. Because, like I said, obviously, I remember Twitter just being an absolute meltdown. Some people, I believe, still have not reinstalled the app because of that. And it was not a good look, Formula 1, because I believe it was around the time that the new logo got announced as well.
Yeah, it was, yeah. So people weren't happy with F1 generally anyway, and then this didn't really help. It reminds me of when Williams, I believe it was it must have been 2021. I remember the livery. It was the white and yellow and blue one with the like barcode looking like thing, and they were launching that through an app. So literally on the morning of the launch, they were like, "Yeah, everyone download our app. It's going to be great." And then someone downloaded it, and obviously it was the most basic software in the world.
It was Inspect Element, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think you could change the time in your phone
Yeah.
to get access to it early.
And then all of the hype around them launching this Williams was gone.
Yeah, not as good as, I can't remember if it was either Red Bull or I think Fernando Alonso did like a promo where you could like submit fan pictures.
Oh dear.
Or something like that, and someone just sent in a naked selfie. It was on his helmet or something, or like on the Red Bull car. It was one or the other.
Yeah, trusting the British public to do anything is an absolute
exactly.
nightmare.
Never forget Boaty McBoatface.
Yeah,
I think that's always the prime
Team
example.
GB holding up the signs. That was quality.
Oh no, that was horrendous, wasn't it?
Because
that took all of 10 minutes before people destroyed that. I'm going to take us back in time, Jamie, to what is we were obviously having to do our research before this podcast into a couple of these that we didn't recognise. This is going to be the wildest story in this segment. The 1959 USGP qualifying. Now, obviously, when I first looked at this, I thought, wow, did something interesting happen at Indianapolis? I was completely wrong. We were completely wrong, weren't we, Jamie?
Yeah.
Because this turned out to be at Sebring. Fun fact for you as well, it was the last ever Grand Prix before the 2019 Australian Grand Prix to give a bonus point for fastest lap. But interestingly, it was a three-way title fight heading into the weekend. Final race of the year. It was a showdown between Brabham, Sterling Moss, and Tony Brooks. So all three drivers, of course, wanted to start at the front of the field, and this was also back at a time as well where on this track, because it had quite a wide front straight, 3 cars could start on the front row. Now, as we got towards the end of qualifying, I believe it was Sterling Moss, Jack Brabham, and Tony Brooks. So our 3 championship contenders. Our 3 title contenders were on the front row of the grid. 2 of them in their Coopers. The other one, Tony Brooks, in his Ferrari.
The GOAT.
Suddenly, at the end of the session, there's been a change. Young American Harry Schell, who I believe only really raced in the US Grand Prix, was kind of based over there, was mysteriously given 3rd place on the grid next to Moss and Brabham, making it a Cooper Climax 1, 2, 3. Ferrari, Enzo Ferrari, of course, absolutely livid about this because it seemed that it had basically gone unnoticed throughout qualifying. And suddenly then, he suddenly obviously just appeared after the session. He was reinstated with this P3. Of course, a lot of people were a bit, kind of confused by this because, it was Formula 1 back then. Times were fairly spread out. He previously set 3 minute 11 and somehow had found 6 seconds on his final qualifying lap. Goes to show people that moan about Formula 1's lack of competitiveness now. It was a 3 minute lap time. Sterling Moss took pole by 3 seconds. So, keep moaning about that, please.
Stop
Formula
moaning about Verstappen
having a 3/10 pole margin or something like that. But yeah, so this battle raged on. Enzo Ferrari absolutely livid with the result. Of course, couldn't really bring Tony Brooks out of the race because there was a championship to be won. But it actually only got found out years later that Harry Schell had found a little bit of a shortcut on the circuit.
That's my guy.
It didn't come out till after the race, but basically what he'd done is there was an S section around the back part of the circuit, and he'd managed to accidentally run off of the circuit here, went down an escape road, found out that it basically was a huge shortcut. So what he did was wait a bit of time until there was a bit of a clearing in the traffic, and just came back onto the track and saved 6 seconds off his lap time. Unfortunately, it would be for no good. He would finish 8th. He was 8th after the first lap, so basically where he would have qualified anyway, and retired on lap 6.
Yes, which is absolute wild. I kind of think why not just go all in and take pole? Because
I think it was a last lap mistake was kind of the thing.
But if he'd have not slowed down, get pole position, win the race, who knows?
Yeah, but if you set like a 2-minute 36 lap time, someone's going to go, not convinced you're 24 seconds quicker than Sterling Moss.
I suppose. But that is a wild story. I would like to see what the equivalent of that is in the modern day. I guess it's kind of like Perez cutting the inside of Cota about 50 times this year and getting away with it.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of a good... that would probably be like now taking the old the old version of Silverstone, isn't it? Out of what is now Turn 1. If you went left down there rather than right, and then came back out onto the track after a few
Plowed
seconds.
through the fan zone,
Down at Abbey, yeah. Just Formula 1 back in the day, man. Absolutely wild.
Yes. Yeah,
just
and
ridiculous.
We'll stay around that time of the life of Formula 1 with the other quite controversial 50s moment in this. Juan Manuel Fangio being kidnapped in Cuba, which is, I don't actually think is that deep on the iceberg. I feel like a lot of people know about this. What I have just found out is his experience is quite interesting because
it was fantastic.
It was. It's the 1958 Cuban Grand Prix, which is pre-revolution, pre-Cuban Missile Crisis, but there is Fidel Castro and his revolutionaries are like bubbling under in Cuba. So this race is kind of the equivalent of the Western world trying to keep them on side. It feels like, which you kind of see now a little bit. Yeah, so you've got Fangio, who is the world champion, on his way to his... No, he has won 5 championships. He's not on his way to his 6th. But he's a year after he won his 5th title. So he is the reigning 4 in a row world champion. So we're thinking...
He's kind of Formula 1 superstar, isn't he, back then?
Yeah. This record wouldn't be beaten until 2003. So quite a long time after. You've got Fangio coming out of his hotel on the morning of the race, and he just gets completely kidnapped at gunpoint by rebels. So, yeah, and they just moved him between 3 different safe houses while people couldn't find him. He didn't enter the race. Well, he did enter, but he didn't start the race because he wasn't there. He basically just didn't show up.
I think didn't show up as a bit harsh.
From their point of view, he was just like laying in bed probably. And yeah, the media depicted his experience as being like really, really bad. You know, he's probably blindfolded in the back of a shed somewhere, being threatened all the time.
Just lamped over and over until he gives people information.
What actually happened was they treated him like he was one of their friends. They let him watch the race. They never blindfolded him. And it was no great hardship. Obviously, it wasn't pleasant because he's still been kidnapped, but he was treated very well. So yeah, a shame he couldn't enter the race, but he did say that if what the rebels did was in good cause, then I, as an Argentine, accept it. So there you go. Maybe that's why they were so nice to him, because he was on their side, kind of. But
I think he was willing to cooperate, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I think he kind of understood where they were coming from, treated them with respect, and they returned it in kind.
There's a Top Gear top tip. If you ever get kidnapped by rebels, just be kind.
Exactly. Pretend you're on their team.
Yes.
Wise words from Jamie183 there, ladies and gentlemen. Let's take a little bit of a dark turn, Jamie. We've gone from rebels that were quite nice. This one we thought, looking at it originally, we were like, 1975 Spanish Grand Prix. What was particularly exciting about that? Just a bit of a pre-warning. This one's pretty dark. We're deep under the watery depths now of the iceberg. This one quite dramatic, but it does come with a couple of interesting statistics with it. So it's 1975. It's the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona around a very, very interesting little street circuit, which I'm not even going to try and pronounce. 75 laps worth of Grand Prix action is meant to be taking place, Jamie. Unfortunately, we only get 29 of which. Niki Lauda had taken pole position on Saturday. It was a Ferrari front row lockout ahead of James Hunt and Mario Andretti. Fun fact about the 1975 Formula 1 season: every team, with the exception of Ferrari, was using Ford DFV engines. That's a little statistic for you as well there. But when we have a look kind of at the race, Jamie and I kind of mentioned this pre-show as well. It feels like if you Wikipedia any Formula 1 race prior to about 1990, there's pretty much always a line saying, laps later, tragedy struck.
Yes.
And that's exactly what happened here. First corner madness ceased. James Hunt was shown as the leader because Lauda had tangled with Mario Andretti and Vittorio Brambilla. That is a Formula 1 name if ever I've heard one.
Oh, yeah.
Sending him into Clay Regazzoni. So both Ferraris were basically out. Regazzoni was allowed to go back out onto the track. But yeah, was way down the order. Patrick Depailler retired on the first lap because of suspension damage. And Wilson Fittipaldi and Arturo Merzario withdrew in protest.
In protest of what?
In protest of...
there were some strikes going on. GDPA.
Guardia Civil would seize the cars, which were the paddock was at the Montjuic Stadium, forced the drivers to call off the strike. Okay.
So
it was about track safety.
The barriers weren't bolted together properly. GDPA drivers didn't do practice, apart from Jackie X, because he wasn't a member of GDPA.
Exactly. So he knew where he was going. Unfortunately, didn't mean he got pole either. James Hunt took the lead of the race. Shockingly, Andretti had managed to keep going. He was running in second with John Watson ahead of Rolf Stommelen. Jody Scheckter then had a tyre failure on lap 4 in his Tyrrell, which caused oil to be dumped onto the circuit, which meant Alan Jones and Mark Donoghue would also have a crash. Hunt would also then slip on the oil and crash as well. So it would then mean that Mario Andretti was leading the race. On lap 24, Ronnie Peterson had a tangle with Francois Migaud while trying to lap the Frenchman as well. But yeah, this is where things get rather dark. The rear wing on Stommelen's Embassy Hill, broke, sending him into the barrier. Ironically, at the point that his own mechanics had worked on. So he hit the barrier that his own team had tried to fix. He bounced off it, back to the road, hitting the barrier across the way, and flying over it, while trying to avoid Stommelen as he crossed the track. Pache crashed. 4 people were unfortunately killed by Stommelen's flying car, including a fireman, a spectator, and 2 photojournalists, with Stommelen himself suffering a broken leg, a broken wrist, and 2 cracked ribs. Staggeringly, despite that, the race would only get called off 4 laps later, during which time Jochen Mass had passed Jackie X, and therefore had won the race. And interesting little fact, despite all of the rather morbid information there, Lele Lombardi would become the only female Formula 1 driver to ever score a point by finishing 6th. But because the race stopped before 60% of race distance, only half points were awarded. So Lele Lombardi there, picking up half a point for, I don't know who she was driving for.
For March.
It was for March, of course.
Of course, we knew that.
But yeah, a very, very dark weekend on Formula 1, which sadly back then was not uncommon.
No, I just realised I don't know any more. So there's 2 left, and sadly I haven't.
Do you not know about the Ferrari bargeboard in Malaysia?
No, you can do that one.
I'll do the Tyrrell 1984 disqualification then. I thought you'd done the Ferrari one, to be fair. I thought we timed this quite well. So, 1984, ladies and gentlemen. Tyrrell, they're in a bit of trouble. People have started bringing all of these turbo cars to Formula 1. And Tyrrell, bless their hearts, they weren't quite the team they had been during the sort of the 60s and 70s. They were starting to struggle. And in 1982, we'd seen Brabham and Williams had developed a nice little feature known as water-cooled brakes, of course, which was fantastic for optimizing braking performance over the course of a race, because brakes tend to get warm, and they were really starting to struggle. Obviously, especially with all these cars with ridiculous power numbers, you were using the brakes quite a lot. The car officially would start the race with a large, full water tank. And then the water was released in the general direction of the brakes, which allowed the car to run under weight when on the track, and unable, obviously, because it was still racing, it then wouldn't get weighed. What they would then do towards the end of the race is that they would then, obviously, on their final pit stop, fill the water tanks again. So obviously when the race finished, the car was back up to weight, effectively making the car, I believe they were about 40 or 50 kilos lighter. Throughout a lot of the race, which obviously, when you're up against a power advantage for most of the other teams, was quite difficult. By 1984, Tyrrell was the only non-turbocharged car now on the grid. So they basically tried the same thing as BMW and Brabham had done a couple of years earlier. The FIA had obviously made a provision to reduce the fuel allowance for each race, which basically meant that, again, obviously, because turbos were very, very economical on fuel, it's why most cars nowadays have got a turbo. Brabham were really screwed, to be honest. So what they did was they tried to obviously put water back into the car, except for they weren't just putting water into it. What they'd actually do is put lead shot into the tanks. So rather than running the car sort of 40-50 kilos lighter, it was 2 gallons of water and 140 pounds of lead shot. So about 80 kilos altogether in the end. After the Detroit Grand Prix, Martin Brundle finished second for Tyrrell. The top cars were as usual impounded for inspection for compliance with the rules. Following this, it was alleged that the water was in fact 27.5% aromatics and constituted an additional fuel source. So Tyrrell were thus charged with taking on additional fuel during the race, which was illegal, use of illegal fuel, which was illegal, equipping the car with illegal fuel lines because they had a water tank to the water injection system, and using ballast that was incorrectly fixed to the car, obviously being that. So Tyrrell were excluded from the 1984 championship and were retroactively disqualified from all races that year, which I believe is the only time in Formula 1 history a team has not only been disqualified from the championship,
but also every
single race they'd already done.
Had they won any
to
races?
That point? No, they come second was their best result that year.
Fair. You wouldn't want to be the guy promoted to the podium like 6 months later.
I wouldn't be too bothered. They were then also they were banned then from the last 3 races as well, and further fined by FISA for their inability to. So they got banned from the last 3 races and then got fined for not showing up to said races.
That is very harsh. Wow, that is very harsh. I bet Tyrrell weren't too pleased about that.
They were very not happy, and it kind of was really the big nail in the coffin that led to their ultimate downfall, which was dragged on until the mid-90s.
Yes. Ferrari bargeboards, the final one of this week. It feels like we've flown by. I guess there's fewer and fewer things.
There's less of them on each one, I've noticed.
Yes. So, Ferrari bargeboard in Malaysia. This is, for some context, 1999, the year before Matt and I entered the Earth.
Just one way of describing it.
There you go. You've got Michael Schumacher in the Ferrari, who's just come back from a broken leg for, I think, 5 or 6 races. So he's out of the championship fight. But you've got his teammate, Eddie Irvine, versus Mika Hakkinen in the McLaren, going for his second world championship. And Irvine, obviously, never won anything because he's not actually very good. But
I almost won that title before Schumacher did for Ferrari.
That would have been awful. I'm kind of glad it didn't now.
I think it was scripted by Ferrari,
really,
to be honest.
Really? Well, this might debunk that myth a little bit. Because
here we go.
October 1999. So you've got one race to go after this. You've got Mika Hakkinen 2 points ahead of Eddie Irvine back in the day when 10 points for a win, 8 for second, that kind of thing.
It was 6?
No, it was 6 for him.
6 back then, yeah.
Yeah, Michael Schumacher's first race back, and he takes pole by almost a second because he is the best driver of this season and would have won the championship if he hadn't broken his leg. So in the race, Schumacher dutifully gave Irvine the victory. Hakkinen finished third, which swung the championship in Irvine's favour by 4 points. So Irvine led the championship 70-66. Ferrari were out for dinner, celebrating a 1-2 finish and the championship lead, when the FIA called and said, "You're disqualified." And the reason for the disqualification was some barge boards at the plate at the on the side of the car, where barge boards tend to be, were a centimetre too short to comply with scrutineering. So both cars had failed this test, and it was it handed Mika Hakkinen the world championship, because obviously the 2 point gap became an 8 point gap, and that's more than a race win back then. So it was a bit of a damp squib, because you've got one race left and they've just handed Hakkinen the title in post. It's probably worse than winning it on a sprint race, I would say. And yeah, Ross Brawn is pretty fuming, the Ferrari boss. He's like, he didn't really try and fight it. He was like, well, scrutineering. If the barge boards are too short, they're too short. So yeah, there's no getting out of it, and that was kind of that. Then a few days later, Ferrari appealed it, and 5 days later in Paris, the barge boards that were found to be illegal in Malaysia were found to be legal, because the scrutineering at the track had thought they were 1 centimetre too short. It turns out they're actually only half a centimetre too short. And apparently, despite this being a technical directive, so there's no... In every other technical directive, there's never any leeway. You're either illegal or you're legal. There's no...
it's pretty black and white, isn't it? Yeah.
Like the Mercedes rear wing a couple of years ago was a few millimetres too wide on the gap, wasn't it? And that was disqualified from qualifying. So, but now the FIA have just made up that you can have a half centimetre buffer, which means the Ferraris were not found to be illegal, had their positions reinstated, and went into Japan with the championship lead with Eddie Irvine. Now, this is like peak Ferrari international assistance, I think. So it's kind of typical that this sort of thing would happen. It happened almost every week, it felt like. And yeah, any other team but Ferrari, and they'd probably just keep them disqualified.
Well, what my favourite bit I love about this was, of course, the FIA had insisted that it was a measuring system was at fault, and admitted that the regulation was not clear enough. So we said, oh no, Ferrari are fine. What often gets forgotten about this, Ferrari was still told to change their barge boards and still showed up to Suzuka with longer barge boards. So of course David Coulthard just goes, how come it's therefore illegal if they've had to change it? How far it was apparently legal if they've had to change it anyway? Yeah. I mean, it was peak FIA, wasn't it? Ferrari International Assistant. Of course, helped then. I can't remember actually off the top of my head. Did Ferrari... What was the gap in the constructors by the end of the year?
Oh, I don't know. I think Ferrari won it, didn't they?
Ferrari did win it, but by how much? I'm just having a quick look now. Because those 16 points could have been really useful come the end. Yeah, they won it by 4 points.
Oh, yeah.
McLaren in the end, after three retirements in a row at the end of the year for David Coulthard. So it really did make a big swing at the end of the season. Shout outs to Jules as well,
hang on.
up in P3.
Schumacher finished second in Japan with Irvine third.
Yes.
If they'd have swapped them over, would Irvine have won the title?
He had 1, 2, 3, 4 wins. Mika had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins because of Japan.
Okay. He also beat him by 1 minute 30, so it would have been quite a long time to wait.
It would have been quite a long time to wait. But of course, had something happened to Hakkinen towards the end of the race. Because let's be fair, this was 1999. Mika Hakkinen had a tendency to throw the car off the road when leading as well. Both at Imola, San Marino, and at Monza that year, I believe.
And he still won a title. Worst championship campaign ever.
Mika Hakkinen is a very, very bizarre case in Formula 1 that I'd love to do a proper deep dive on in the future. Shout out as well to Mika Salo. 2 podiums in that Ferrari.
Yeah, did well.
Did really well that year.
He should have won in Germany, but he handed it to Irvine, didn't he?
He did.
So
he did.
2 out of 4 of Irvine's wins were given to him.
And Michael Schumacher just beat out Ralf Schumacher that year. Heinz-Harald Frentzen was the best German of 1999.
Yeah, and tied at Jerez. Oh, no, that was 97, wasn't it?
That was 97, Jamie.
Never mind.
Jerez was long on by 1999. There we go, though. That is, part 5 of the Formula 1 Iceberg. Of course, next weekend, Jamie and I will be doing our big F1 2023 quiz. So that's always a lot of fun as well. Obviously, an interactive quiz that you guys can join in on as well. Quick little bits of news, though, haven't we, Jamie? We've got a couple of bits and pieces. Ferrari have announced their 2024 car reveal date.
They have.
Going live February 13th next year. What are our thoughts and feelings?
Well, it's a date, isn't it? So
it's a date. It's Shrove Tuesday, I believe. So you're going to be eating pancakes.
Wow. On the podcast, maybe. Who knows?
Do it. Eat podcasts. Eat podcasts on the pancakes. Wow. Eat pancakes on the podcast.
Maybe.
Do it, sir. Do it, sir.
Also,
we'll put it through as a business expense.
Alfa Romeo have now got a new name.
Yep, it's the worst name in recent history.
It is it's something kick Sauber, isn't it?
It's Stake Formula Sauber Kick Racing.
It's Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber.
It's so bad. I wouldn't have even mind Stake Sauber F1 Racing or Formula 1 Team or something like that, but it's not. And of course we've got Raging Bulls or not Raging Bulls AlphaTauri still, haven't we? So we don't quite know what they're doing with that.
Yeah. Well, it's AlphaTauri Scuderia RB. So
very, very cryptic and mysterious as well. I'm just having a look, at the 1999 season. Mika Hakkinen took pole in all but 5 races that year. That McLaren was on rails over one lap. Heinz-Harald Frentzen won the Italian Grand Prix as well.
You're just waffling at this point. We should.
That's a fun fact for you. I've just found out. Anything else to add though, Jamie?
Anything else to add?
Bear in mind, this might be the second to last time you ever appear on the Matt 2 and 2 YouTube channel.
Oh, it definitely won't be. I always work my way back in.
You always will find a way, don't you, to get yourself back in the limelight.
Yeah, I don't really want to say much more because I might just start coughing up my lungs again.
Cough up a lung, yeah. We'll end it there then. Thank you all so much as always for listening. If you have enjoyed, please do make sure to leave a like. Get yourself subscribed to the Knowing Wheel channel. One more podcast, Jamie, on the main channel. We this has been like 6 months in the planning, hasn't it?
Yeah.
And I don't think either of us ever thought this day would come. But we are nearing the end. But not really. Thank you all as always so much for listening. And we'll be back very, very soon.